The Kendal train crash was the deadliest in Jamaica's history and the second worst in the world. Numerous books and videos have covered this tragic event, and I must commend the creators and authors for their excellent and professional work. However, one crucial detail has always been missing. No one has definitively stated what caused the crash. Many theories have been proposed, ranging from poor train maintenance to the accidental closure of an angle wheel brake. But none of these are true. The train was in perfect working condition, and the engines were brand new. Now I will tell you exactly what led to this horrific disaster. On Saturday morning, August 31st, 1957, a large crowd gathered at the Kingston Railroad Station for an all-day excursion to Montego Bay. The trip was sponsored by St. Anne's Catholic Church, located at 5 Percy Street in Kingston. The train consisted of 12 passenger coaches and 2 locomotive engines, one at the front of the train, driven by Thomas, and the other at the rear, driven by John. This is not their real name. Each coach had a seating capacity of approximately 85 passengers. During boarding, passengers were only allowed to take available seats. Standing was strictly prohibited. Once all seats were filled, the superintendent gave the order, "No more passengers." He then blew the whistle, signaling the 2 drivers, and the train departed for Montego Bay. As the train pulled away, a sizable crowd was left behind, outnumbering those who had managed to board the train. Instead of heading home, the crowd that was left behind at the station was determined to join their friends and family on the excursion. They piled into buses, cars, taxicabs, and trucks, forming a massive convoy heading toward Montego Bay. When they arrived, the atmosphere was festive, like a grand beach party. Tables were set up with food and all kinds of beverages, while people played games like dominoes, cards, and ludi. Among the crowd at one table sat all the railroad employees, including the 2 engineers who had driven the train. They were enjoying themselves, drinking Appleton rum, laughing, and sharing railroad stories. At one point, John, the engineer who had operated the rear engine, turned to Thomas and said, "You drove the lead engine from Kingston to Montego Bay. Let me take the lead on the way back." Thomas immediately refused. "No one will drive my train but me," he said firmly. The disagreement escalated, and tempers flared. At this stage, the men were seriously intoxicated and under the influence. John snapped, "You don't want anyone to drive your train? Gooey from me. I can drive train better than you." The 2 men stood up, ready to fight, but their fellow railroad workers quickly intervened, calming them down. The other men sided with John. "Thomas, you led the way here," they said. "Let him lead the way back. It's only fair." But Thomas stood his ground. "Nobody drives my train. I will be the only one driving that train." The argument reignited. A lot of heated words were exchanging. John repeated, "Man, go away from me! I can drive train better than you." Finally, a railroad manager stepped in. "Listen, Thomas," he said, "if you don't want John driving your engine, then switch places. Put your engine at the back, and John will take the front. Problem solved." As a manager, his words carried weight. Thomas, feeling humiliated and crushed by John's repeated taunts, had no choice but to comply. The 2 went and switched the engines around. When they returned, they sat back down and drowned their dispute in more Appleton rum. But there was bad blood between them. As the time to leave approached, the engineers climbed into their engines and blew the train whistle, signaling to everyone that it was time to head back to Kingston. The people who had arrived in cars, buses, trucks, and taxicabs were supposed to return to Kingston the same way. But instead of boarding their original vehicles, they rushed the train, swarming into the coaches until it was packed beyond capacity. People stood in the doorways, clung to the steps, squeezed between cars, and even climbed onto the roof. The train was overflowing. The superintendent of the Montego Bay Railroad Station, seeing the chaos, announced, "Anyone who didn't come on the train, get off." But no one listened. No one moved. For hours, they tried to persuade the crowd to leave the train, but it was useless. Finally, they called the police. Back then, the police didn't carry guns. Instead, they had wooden clubs, known in some places as billy clubs or nightsticks, but locally called baton sticks. The officers ran up to the train, swinging their baton sticks and shouting, "Boy, get off the train!" But the men on board weren't intimidated. Some warned, "Mind how you swing that thing. If you hit me with it, I'll take it from you and beat you over the head." The train erupted in laughter. The police hesitated, stepping back. These officers weren't like the tough ones from the Harmon barracks. These cops were used to dealing with decent, law-abiding citizens. But these men, they were rough, unrepentant, sin-hardened, and completely unfazed. After hours of failed attempts, the superintendent threw up his hands. "Look, it's getting late. We can't keep the train here any longer. The police can't get them off, and they should have left hours ago." Frustrated, he signaled the drivers, blew his whistle, and with that, the train pulled out of the station, bound for Kingston, packed to the brim with rebellious passengers. In railroad operations, when a train has two engines, one in the front and one in the rear, the lead engineer is in charge. He communicates with the rear driver using the train whistle, signaling instructions. For example, 1 blast means it's clear to start moving. 2 blasts mean extra power is needed for an uphill climb. 3 blasts signal that the train is moving too fast and should slow down in preparation for stopping. As soon as they left Montego Bay, Thomas, who was driving the rear engine, set the speed control lever to full speed ahead, never adjusting it whether they were climbing a hill, descending on a straight path, or navigating curves. Because he refused to change the throttle position, the train quickly exceeded the safe operating speed for the track. John, the lead engineer, continuously blew the whistle, signaling that they were going too fast. But Thomas ignored him. Witnesses in the cab reported hearing Thomas say mockingly, Say you can drive train better than me? Drive better than me now," like a roller coaster. The train hurtles down the tracks, swaying wildly from side to side, its wheels screeching like a thrill ride at an amusement park gone wrong. The unsuspecting passengers, unaware of the danger that they are in, are caught up in their own worlds. Some were sleeping peacefully, even in the overhead luggage rack above the seated passengers. Young men with arms around their girlfriends whispering sweet nothing. Some children sleep soundly, while those still awake giggle and shriek, their little hands pressed against the windows as they marvel at the dark night scenery racing past. In another coach, a group of old men argue animatedly over a game of cards they played earlier on the beach, their laughter booming through the crowded carriage. Throughout the train, hooligans laugh raucously, cigarette smoke curling lazily above their heads, despite the disapproving glares of fellow passengers. The train was so tightly packed that, despite rocking from side to side, no one needed to hold on to stay balanced. John, the lead engineer, wiped sweat from his brow as he desperately fought to control the speeding train, doing everything in his power to slow it down. He blasted the horn repeatedly, sending urgent signals back to Thomas, urging him to ease off. But it was useless. Each time Thomas heard the whistle's desperate plea, he stubbornly refused to comply. Instead, he refrained, Say you can drive train better than me? Drive better than me now." John knew the railway tracks very well. He had traveled this route many times and was aware of every turn. He also knew that at Kendal, the tracks had dangerous curves that would be impossible to navigate at such high speeds. When they approached Kendal, like a boulder tumbling down a mountainside, the locomotive roars forward, sparks flying from its wheels as it barrels ahead. The sheer weight of all the passengers and the speed of the train going down an incline, with Thomas' engine pushing relentlessly, make it an unstoppable force. Desperate to avoid disaster, John applied maximum braking, engaging both the automatic service brake and the dynamic engine brake. This created a deadly conflict, because the two trains were pushing against each other with great force. The front engine was trying to slow down, but the rear engine was still pushing forward at full speed. Then, disaster struck. Under immense pressure, the coupling binding the train together gives way with a deafening snap. In an instant, chaos erupts. The once unified coaches slam into each other with massive force. Wood splinter in pieces like shattering glass. The violent impact tears the train apart, splitting the carriages like a devastating explosion. One after another, they collapse, telescoping into a mangled wreck of broken wood and steel. Screams are drowned out by the thunderous destruction as everything in its path is crushed, obliterated beyond recognition. No one stands a chance. The train is no longer a transporting machine. It is now a merciless force of annihilation. Some critical facts stand out. The excursion took place on Saturday, August 31st, but the accident occurred just after midnight on Sunday, September 1st. Neither of the engines derailed. They remained on the track. However, the passenger coach violently collided with each other, derailed and flipped over, crumbling and mounting on top of one another. No one knows how many people died that night, because there were no records of how many people were on the train. Plus, there were people who were taken to the hospital and later died from their injuries. At the time, Norman Manley, Jamaica's chief minister and father of Michael Manley, ordered an investigation. Thomas was found responsible for the crash and was tried for manslaughter, convicted, and sentenced to prison. His life fell apart. After serving his sentence, he became a homeless drunk, lost his mind, and wandered the streets, talking to himself. Out of respect for the families of the victims, the Catholic Church and the Jamaican government chose to keep the investigation's findings private. The true details of what happened that tragic night were never officially made public. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment below. See you in the next one.